Celtic Badass of the Week showcases a different badass person of Celtic heritage each week. Those who exemplify the give no shit attitude and come out on top. They may come from our past or our present, but rest assured they come from all walks of life and legend. They are men, women, even old ladies and pirate queens. You don't have to be a muscled-up Celt in a fur kilt swinging a mighty sword. You can just be a 4'11" Welsh woman and suffragette who knows jujitsu. Most of these badasses are all too real. While some may be only legend, badass legends though. The only prerequisite for this title is Celtic blood and badassidness. This week's Celtic badass is John Nicholson. Now, his commanding officer once quoted as saying that John was gifted in mind and body. He was as brilliant in government as in arms. The snows of Ghanzi attest to his youthful fortitude. The songs of the Punjab, his many deeds. The peace of this frontier, his strong rule. The enemies of this country know how terrible he was in battle, and we, his friends, have to recall how gentle, generous, and true he was. Captain John Nicholson was a cranky, humorless, God-fearing, self-proclaimed clairvoyant Irishman who commanded regiments of hardcore kukri-swinging Gurkha, did battle with ferocious Afghan tribal warriors, crossed swords with blood-raging Sikhs, and rampaging Indian mutineers, kept the severed head of a convicted outlaw on his desk as a warning to criminals, and used to hunt Bengal Tigers on horseback using only a cavalry saber for fun. Now, between writing down apex predators and crushing the skulls of all who opposed him in a blood explosion of gruesome vengeance, Captain Nicholson was so damned effective as an ultimate paragon of Victorian English colonial badassitude, of diplomatic iron-fistedness, that he was worshipped as a god in some rural sections of the Punjab until the mid-1980s, and is forever remembered by the British history texts as the hero of Delhi, and is equal parts respected and despised by roughly everyone on the Indian subcontinent. Now, Nicholson was born in Lisburn, a suburb of Belfast in Northern Ireland, on December 11th, 1822. Now, aside from him attending some school I've never heard of before, there isn't much to say about his early life, since on the day that Nicholson turned 16, his uncle, a member of Parliament and a prominent lawyer for the British East India Company, bought Nicholson a commission in the British Army, enlisted him in the Bengal infantry, and put him on a boat to India on a mission to go and spread death, destruction, and Christianity with cups of tea and buttered scones on the savages of the name of the Pax Britannia. So, at a time when most kids his age were wearing out soiling their wild oats, Ensign John Nicholson of the 27th Native Infantry Regiment was charging across a bullet-ridden battlefield, sword raised high above his head, leading a ruthless platoon of battle-forged hardcore Indian sepoy soldiers in a non-stop, uncontrollable death match against the ferocious tribal warriors of rural Afghanistan, participating in the First Anglo-Afghan War from 1839 to 1842. The young ensign was decorated for bravery during the Ghanzi campaign, when he was part of a column that force marched 147 miles through the mountains and deserts of Afghanistan, captured Kandahar from the enemy, and personally led his daring sepoy soldiers on a frontal assault against the city of Ghanzi. Using ladders to cross a moat and scale 70-foot walls, while tens of thousands of Afghans hurled musket fire, arrows, and cinder blocks violently towards them. Once he and his men breached the walls, they forced their way to the center of the city, where they were cut off, surrounded, and forced to engage the enemy hand-to-hand with bayonets and swords until more troops could be brought up to help them exploit the breakout. Shortly after the battle, Nicholson's battalion was attached to a unit that was sneak attacked by the enemy, surrounded and captured in a fierce battle. Never one to bow down in the face of obscenely overwhelming odds, no matter how redonkulous the situation is. The enterprising Irishman escaped by simply bribing his guard to unlock the gate, then walked out of an Afghan prison and fled on foot across Afghanistan to regroup with his men. By the time Nicholson got back to British lines, the war was over. But just a few years later, Nicholson got the chance to prove himself yet again, this time in the Anglo-Sikh War of 1845. Now, Nicholson was a rampaging, enemy-smiting bastard, and the only thing this dude was interested in appeasing was his foot up the asses of anyone who stood opposed to him. Nicholson assaulted and captured the city of Multan and defended it against the withering Sikh counterattack despite taking a nasty Kirpan dagger wound to some unspecified part of his anatomy. Fighting these worthy adversaries, such a fulfilling experience for Nicholson that he couldn't stay away from him, and he earned even more military honors for capturing the city of Adak during the Second Anglo-Sikh War in 1848, when he bluffed the city into surrendering even though he was dying of cholera and was outnumbered 3-1 by the defenders. Now, his successes and victories against these valiant warriors were so impressive that the British East India Company finally annexed a huge portion of the Punjab from its Sikh rulers. Nicholson was appointed administrator of the most lawless, toughest, most inhospitable province they had, northern Kashmir, a half Sikh, half Muslim region in present-day Pakistan that at the time shared the tenuous border with Afghanistan. Now, the Punjabis, they're a tough group of people, but Nicholson, a stern, unflinchingly badass Irishman who knew a thing or two about cracking skulls, somehow won their respect. He learned to speak Urdu. He learned their culture and their code of honor, a code of honor that demanded that no offense go unpunished, and he took it to heart. Sure, he was known for his foul temper, his authoritarian practices, and his propensity to whip out a cast iron club and beat people with it when they took too long to explain something. But Nicholson was also universally respected as fair, just, and honorable, and he brought food, medicine, aid, and order to the people of Punjab, personally adjudicating most disputes and punishing everyone from corrupt politicians to violent criminals with sentences ranging from public flogging to summary execution without trial. And he didn't have any time or interest in bureaucratic red tape, general messing around, or anything else that required him to suffer fools. One time, a psychotic religious fanatic charged him with a dagger in the middle of the street, so Nicholson flung the dude to the ground, grabbed a rifle off a British sentry, and capped the guy point blank in the back of the head with a .577 caliber mini ball. Another time, he heard a rumor that his cooks were planning on poisoning his soup, so he stormed into the kitchen and ordered them to taste it. They refused. He fed some to a monkey he found somewhere. Of course, it died. Then he had every cook on staff hanged from a post outside the mess hall. Then he went back and ate dinner. On yet another occasion, he put a huge price on the head of a notorious outlaw. But when it took bounty hunters too long to bring him in, Nicholson personally rode out to the dude's village by himself, killed the bandit leader in a sword fight, decapitated his corpse on the spot, brought the head back to Multan, and displayed it on his desk for months as a warning to everyone about what happens when they mess with the Queen's representative in Punjab. Now, it took John Nicholson 5 years to take the most lawless, wildest region of present-day Pakistan and to not only render it completely free of crime, but to make himself so well respected, feared, and beloved in the process that the cult of Nikhal Sain was formed to worship the Lion of Punjab as a living god. As of a book I read in the 1980s, this cult was still in existence in some remote mountain regions on the border of Pakistan and Afghanistan. That's like Augustus Caesar shit right there. Everything was going pretty great with regards to decapitations and things until 1857, when roughly 2/3 of the Indian army suddenly rose up, revolted against the East India Company, overthrew their British overlords, and demanded Indian autonomy and freedom from Victorian bullshit. Now, I can kind of see where some of the mutineers were coming from, because who wants to be ruled by a faceless, evil global corporation based halfway around the world? But when the mutineers started massacring British prisoners of war and executing their wives and children, you can probably see why Captain John, eye for eye, Nicholson wasn't too interested in any sort of negotiation that didn't involve ramming a bayonet into someone's freaking throat and then tossing their corpse into a ditch. The 33-year-old captain, already an 18-year veteran who had served 3 of the British Empire's most vicious wars, was breveted a brigadier general and dispatched to ride 300 miles to Delhi to crush the revolt at its source and personally overthrow the last Mughal Empire of India. Now, under his command were 3 cavalry regiments and 7 battalions of Punjab infantry, as well as his personal bodyguard of 200 fanatically loyal Muslim Multani tribesmen, hardcore badasses who took no pay for their service and took orders from no man except Nicholson, and slept every night outside the door to his private quarters so that no one could enter. This detachment hauled ass 40 miles a day through the brutal heat and 110% humidity of the Indian summer, stopping only to wipe out disorganized regiments of mutineers, crush them in battle, and execute their leaders by strapping them back first to the business end of cannons and blowing them apart with point-blank canister shot. When Nicholson and his wild army of madmen reached the outskirts of Delhi, they found a demoralized, beaten-down army of Brits, loyal Sepoy Indian troops, and Gurkhas camped along a wide ridge overlooking the fortress city. Nicholson walked right up to the commanding officer, a no-nuts, overly cautious, ridiculously old dude who was only in charge because the unit's 3 highest-ranking officers had all died of cholera in the last calendar month, and he demanded that they attack the city at once. General Old Dude was like, well, we only have 8,000 dudes here, and there are like 35,000 of them entrenched behind 120-foot walls and a moat, so why don't you just F off? But Nicholson wasn't about to take that answer. When he pressed the general for information, the guy was like, oh well, we have like 13-mile-long train of artillery-toting elephants coming out to help. Okay, let's just chill out until they get there. Nicholson was like, how the hell are you defending it? And when the general responded with, Nicholson got his men together, ran out with 2,500 troops, charged straight onto the center of a 6,000-man unit that had been sent to destroy the supply train, crushed it without mercy while only losing 800 of his own troops, and personally escorted the siege guns to the front so they could blast the walls of Delhi to a pile of rubble. The morale of the defenders had changed immediately, and the once weary troops now started referring to Nicholson as the general, even though technically he was only a captain and not in charge at all. Nicholson demanded that General Old Dude attack, and when that a-hole still refused, Nicholson sent a request that he be removed from power. When it looked like that would be a possibility, the general, fearing for his job, finally ordered the assault. And in the early hours of September 13, 1857, Captain John Nicholson personally led a column that charged toward Delhi's Kashmiri Gate, supported by siege artillery. Nicholson's men, the Brits, the Indians, the Punjabis, and the Gurkhas ripped through the walls, battling the enemy hand-to-hand with rifle butts and bayonets, refusing to back down or give ground despite being outnumbered 4-1. In some crazy-style street warfare madness, after scaling the outer walls, capturing the parapets, breaching through 2 gates, and creating a solid entry point for British troops to pour in, Nicholson urged his troops to keep fighting and press the attack while the enemy was reeling. His men, exhausted from hours of non-stop battle, then watched in awe as their commanding officer personally led the troop down a crowded street, revolver blazing, sword fighting a swarm of enemy troops while snipers took shots at him from rooftops and windows. Nicholson, battling to the end, was hit in the back by a sniper's bullet and fell in the street. He knew the wound was mortal the moment it hit him. However, it took Captain John Nicholson 9 days to die. He only allowed himself to go after he knew the battle was won, that Delhi had fallen, and that the Mughal Empire had been captured, and the rebellion crushed. He was so resolute in his determination that at one point on his deathbed, he heard a rumor that General Olde was considering calling off the attack, and his only response was, "Thank God I have yet the strength to shoot him if necessary." At his funeral, his loyal mutiny, horsemen, brave, fearless, gigantically badass warriors, whose code of honor mandated that any man who shed a tear was to be punished by being flogged by women, threw themselves on his grave and wept. That's badass.